The office was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that only comes after everyone has gone home for the day, leaving behind empty desks and dark computer screens. It was almost 9 in the evening when David finally closed his laptop and rubbed his tired eyes. He'd been the CEO of his tech company for 8 years now, and somewhere along the way, these late nights had become normal. Board meetings, investor calls, strategy sessions, the days just seemed to blur together. Tonight had been particularly exhausting. 3 back-to-back meetings about quarterly projections, and his head was pounding. David stood up and stretched, his back cracking from sitting too long in the same position. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and took one last look around his office on the 15th floor. The city lights sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, he felt a strange sense of loneliness despite being surrounded by everything he'd worked so hard to build. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was just the emptiness of the building at this hour. The numbers counted down slowly on the display above the door. 15, 14, 13. David's mind wandered to his weekend plans, a rare couple of days off he'd promised his wife. When the elevator reached the ground floor, something felt different. Before the doors even slid open, he could hear voices coming from the lobby. Raised voices. Not angry exactly, but urgent, stressed. The doors opened with their usual soft ding, and David stepped forward, then stopped. The lobby stretched out before him, all polished marble floors and modern furniture. The company logo glowed softly on the wall behind the reception desk. And there, near the security desk, stood Robert, the night guard who'd been with the company for over 2 decades. Robert was a fixture of the building, always friendly, always reliable. But right now, Robert looked uncomfortable. He was talking to a young woman holding a small child. David couldn't see their faces clearly from where he stood, but something about the scene made him pause. His instinct was to just walk past, head to his car, go home. This was a security matter, not something the CEO needed to involve himself in. But he didn't move. Instead, he stepped to the side, behind one of the large marble columns that supported the lobby ceiling. He wasn't sure why he was hiding exactly. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something else. The woman's voice carried across the quiet lobby. She sounded young, maybe in her late 20s. And she sounded desperate. Please, just for tonight. We won't cause any trouble. I promise we'll be gone before anyone comes in tomorrow morning. Robert's voice was gentle but firm. Ma'am, I really wish I could help you, but I can't. If anyone finds out I let someone stay here overnight, I'll lose my job. I've got grandkids to support. I'm sorry, I really am. I understand, I do. The woman's voice cracked. But I don't know where else to go. My car broke down 2 blocks from here, and I don't have anyone I can call. Not at this hour. David felt his stomach tighten. There was something familiar about her voice, but he couldn't place it. The child, a little girl who looked about 4 or 5, stirred in the woman's arms. Mommy, I'm cold, she said in a small, sleepy voice. I know, sweetheart. Just a little bit longer, okay? Robert shifted his weight, clearly torn. Look, there's a shelter about 6 blocks south of here. I can call them, see if they have space. I tried calling them earlier. They're full. The woman adjusted her hold on the child, and that's when she turned slightly and David saw her face under the lobby lights. His breath caught in his throat. It was Jennifer from the software development team. He'd seen her in meetings, passed her in the hallway. She was always smiling, always professional. One of the younger developers, someone he'd heard good things about from her managers. And here she was in his lobby at 9 at night, begging the security guard to let her and her daughter sleep in the building. David's mind raced. How was this possible? Jennifer worked for him. She had a job, a paycheck. How could she have nowhere to go? My apartment building was condemned 3 weeks ago, Jennifer was explaining to Robert, her voice barely above a whisper now. Structural problems. They gave us 48 hours to get out. I've been living in my car since then, but tonight it just died. Won't start. And I can't afford a tow truck and a mechanic. I can barely afford gas. Robert's expression showed nothing but sympathy, but his hands were tied. I'm so sorry. I really am. But my supervisor does random checks. If he finds you here, I know. I'm sorry for putting you in this position. Jennifer's shoulders sagged. Come on, sweetie, she said to her daughter. We'll figure something out. She turned to leave, and David felt something snap inside him. He couldn't just let her walk out into the night. He couldn't pretend he hadn't heard this. Before he could second-guess himself, he stepped out from behind the column. Wait. Both Jennifer and Robert turned, startled. Jennifer's face went from confusion to recognition to pure horror in the span of 2 seconds. The color drained from her cheeks. "Mr. Thompson," she stammered. I wasn't. How long has this been going on?" David asked, his voice quieter than he'd intended. Jennifer looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Her daughter watched him with wide, curious eyes. 3 weeks, she finally said. "I've been coming in early, using the gym shower before anyone gets here. I didn't want anyone to know. I was going to figure it out, I promise. Please don't fire me. This job is all I have. I'll resign if you want, but please, I need the reference, David held up his hand, cutting off her panicked rambling. His mind was spinning, trying to process what he was hearing. This woman worked for him. She showed up every day, did her job, and he'd had no idea she was homeless. How is that possible? He looked at her daughter, who was now clutching her mother's neck, sensing the tension in the air. The little girl was wearing clothes that looked slightly too small, and her hair needed washing. But her eyes were bright, intelligent. A question formed in David's mind, one he wasn't sure he wanted the answer to. "How many others?" he asked. Jennifer looked confused. "Sir? How many other people in this company are going through something like this?" The question hung in the air. Jennifer bit her lip, clearly weighing whether to answer honestly. Finally, she spoke. "I know of at least 3 others who are struggling really badly. Tom from accounting is sleeping on his friend's couch. Lisa from marketing is working 2 jobs just to make rent. And Brian from IT had his power shut off last month." David felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. 4 people. 4 people he was responsible for. People who worked hard every day and they were barely surviving. He looked at Robert, who was watching the exchange with a mixture of concern and confusion. Then back at Jennifer and her daughter. Everything was about to change. He just didn't know it yet. David didn't go home that night. Not right away. Instead, he sat in his car in the parking garage for almost an hour, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. He'd sent Jennifer and her daughter to a hotel. His personal credit card, he'd called a tow truck for her car, and he'd told her to take the next day off, that they'd figure things out. The look of relief and disbelief on her face was something he knew he'd never forget. But now, alone in his car, the weight of what he'd learned pressed down on him like a physical thing. 4 employees struggling, that he knew of. How many more were there? How had he missed this? When he finally got home, his wife was already asleep. He lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows move as cars passed by outside. His mind wouldn't stop racing. At some point, exhaustion won, and he fell into an uneasy sleep. The alarm went off at 6:30 like it always did. But this morning felt different. David got ready for work in a daze, barely tasting his coffee, barely hearing his wife's cheerful goodbye. By 7:30, he was back in his office, the building still mostly empty. He canceled his 9 o'clock meeting. Then his 10 o'clock. His assistant, Carol, knocked on his door around 8:15, confused. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "I need you to set up a meeting," David said, not looking up from his computer. "This morning. As soon as possible. Patricia from HR and James from finance. Tell them it's urgent. And Carol, tell them it's confidential." Carol's eyebrows rose, but she knew better than to ask questions when he used that tone. "I'll get right on it." By 9:30, Patricia and James were sitting in his office, both looking concerned. Patricia, the HR director, had been with the company for 6 years. James, the CFO, had been there even longer. They were good people. People he trusted. David told them everything. About Jennifer. About the lobby. About what he'd learned. When he finished, the room was silent. Patricia spoke first. "I had no idea. She never came to HR. Never filed any kind of assistance request. Because we don't have an assistance program," David said quietly. "Do we?" James shifted in his seat. "We have the standard benefits package. Health insurance, 401k matching, 2 weeks vacation. That's not what I'm asking." David leaned forward. "If an employee has an emergency, if they lose their housing, or their car breaks down, or they can't afford groceries, what do we offer them?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "I want to know how many people are struggling," David said. I want a survey, anonymous, financial wellness, housing stability, food security, everything. And I want it done by the end of next week. Patricia nodded slowly. I can do that. But David, if we open this door, we need to be prepared for what we find, and we need to be ready to do something about it. That's exactly what I'm counting on. James looked uncomfortable. I understand where you're coming from, I do. But we need to be realistic about budget constraints. If we're talking about implementing new programs, then we find the money. David cut him off. Figure it out. That's what I pay you for. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but he didn't take them back. James's expression tightened, but he nodded. Over the next week, David couldn't focus on anything else. He attended meetings but didn't really hear what was being said. He reviewed reports but couldn't retain the numbers. His mind kept going back to Jennifer, to her daughter's small voice saying she was cold. The survey went out on Tuesday. Anonymous, optional, but encouraged. Patricia had crafted it carefully, asking questions about financial stress, housing security, emergency savings, and whether employees felt their compensation was adequate for the local cost of living. David checked his email obsessively, waiting for the results. By Friday afternoon, Patricia knocked on his door. Her face was pale. The results are in, she said quietly, closing the door behind her. You need to see this. She handed him a printed report and David started reading. With each line, his stomach sank further. Out of 340 employees, 218 had responded. 47 reported severe financial stress. 23 had experienced homelessness or housing insecurity in the past year. 89 said they were one emergency away from financial crisis. 1 in 3 employees reported having less than $500 in savings. David felt sick. There's more, Patricia said softly. Read the comments section. He flipped to the back pages. The anonymous comments were heartbreaking. One person wrote about choosing between their medication and groceries. Another described living in their car for 2 months after a medical bill wiped out their savings. Someone else talked about working a second job on weekends, barely seeing their kids just to make rent. Most of these are from our junior staff, Patricia explained. Entry-level positions, some mid-level. The pay scale hasn't been adjusted in 3 years, and the cost of living in this city has gone up nearly 30% in that same time. David set down the report. His hands were shaking. How did we not know this? Because people are good at hiding it, Patricia said. They're embarrassed. They're afraid of being judged or worse, let go. So they smile, they show up, they do their jobs, and they suffer in silence. That afternoon, David did something he'd never done before. He left the office at 3 and drove around the city. Really looked at it. He saw the tent cities under the highway overpasses, the rising apartment buildings with luxury pricing, the long lines at the food bank near downtown. He drove past a grocery store and saw Jennifer's car in the parking lot. The same old sedan he'd had towed and repaired. It was running now, but barely. Through the store window, he could see her at the checkout line with her daughter, carefully counting out cash, putting a few items back when she didn't have enough. David didn't go inside. He didn't want to embarrass her, but he sat in his car and watched, and something broke inside him. This was his employee, someone who worked hard, who showed up every day, who did everything right, and she was counting pennies at the grocery store while he'd just bought a second vacation home. When he got home that evening, his wife noticed something was different. Bad day? She asked. Eye-opening day, he corrected. He told her everything, about Jennifer, about the survey results, about what he'd seen. His wife listened, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. What are you going to do? She finally asked. David looked at her. I'm going to fix it. That's going to cost a lot of money. I know. The board isn't going to like it. I know that too. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Then let's figure out how. That weekend, David didn't play golf. He didn't relax by the pool. Instead, he sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, spreadsheets and reports, building a plan. He looked at salary ranges, profit margins, executive compensation. He ran the numbers over and over. By Sunday night, he had something. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a real start. On Monday morning, he called his entire executive team, all 8 of them. He asked them to come to his house that evening for dinner. Unusual, yes, but necessary, because what he was about to propose would change everything. And he needed them on his side, or he was prepared to do it alone. The executives started arriving at David's house around 6:30 that evening. They came in expensive cars, wearing casual but designer clothes, looking relaxed and curious. Monday night dinner at the CEO's house wasn't normal, but it wasn't entirely unusual either. Maybe he wanted to celebrate something. Maybe it was a team-building thing. They had no idea what was coming. David's wife had prepared a simple dinner, nothing fancy. Pasta, salad, bread. She'd insisted on keeping it low-key. If you're going to ask them to make sacrifices, she'd said, don't serve them $100 steaks first. By 7, everyone was seated around the dining room table. Michael, the chief operating officer, James from finance, Patricia from HR, Linda, who ran marketing, Kevin from sales, Rachel from product development, Tom, the CTO, and Susan, who handled legal matters. They ate and made small talk. David barely touched his food. His stomach was in knots. Finally, after dessert was cleared, his wife excused herself and David stood up. I need to talk to you all about something, he began. Something important. The chatter died down. All eyes turned to him. He told them everything. About working late that Thursday night. About hearing voices in the lobby. About Jennifer and her daughter. About the survey results. About driving around the city and really seeing it for the first time. About watching his employee count pennies at the grocery store. When he finished, the silence around the table was heavy. Michael spoke first. That's terrible. Really terrible. But David, we can't save everyone. We're a business, not a charity. I'm not asking us to save everyone, David said, his voice steady. I'm asking us to take care of our own people. The people who work for us. The people who make this company run. James, the CFO, leaned back in his chair. What exactly are you proposing? David pulled out his laptop and opened it on the table. I'm proposing we give immediate wage increases to everyone earning below a certain threshold. 15 to 20% depending on the position. I'm proposing we create an emergency assistance fund for employees facing crisis situations. I'm proposing we partner with local apartment complexes to subsidize housing for our lower-paid staff. And I'm proposing we completely restructure how we think about compensation in this company. The room erupted. That's going to cost millions, James said, his face flushing. Where exactly do you think that money is coming from? From us, David said simply. Everyone stared at him. Last year, the 8 of us in this room took home bonuses totaling $4.2 million. Meanwhile, we have employees sleeping in their cars. I'm proposing we cut executive bonuses by 40% and redirect that money to these programs. Michael nearly choked on his water. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Linda, the marketing director, spoke up. Her voice was quieter than the others. I actually think this is the right thing to do. I've been feeling guilty about my bonus for a while now, to be honest. This isn't about guilt, Michael shot back. This is about business reality. We earned those bonuses. We hit our targets. We grew the company. Why should we be punished because some people can't manage their money? David felt anger flash through him. Can't manage their money? Jennifer was making $38,000 a year in one of the most expensive cities in the country. Her rent was taking 60% of her take-home pay before her building was condemned. That's not about money management. That's about us not paying people enough to live. She could move somewhere cheaper, Michael argued. Then who's going to do her job? Patricia interjected. You want all our junior staff to move 2 hours away? You want to lose talented people because we're too cheap to pay them fairly? I didn't say cheap, I said realistic. Enough. David's voice cut through the argument. Here are the facts. We've been profitable for 5 straight years. Our profit margins are healthy. We're not struggling. We're thriving. And we're thriving on the backs of people who can't afford to eat. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. I've run the numbers. If we implement these changes, yes, it will cost us about $3.8 million in the first year. But look at what we spend on turnover. Last year, we lost 42 employees. The cost of recruiting, hiring, and training their replacements was over $2 million. People leave because they can't survive here. If we fix that, we reduce turnover, we increase productivity, and in the long run, we probably save money. James studied the numbers on the screen. That's assuming your theory is correct. It's not a theory. It's human nature. People who aren't stressed about money work better. People who feel valued stay longer. This isn't revolutionary thinking. Kevin from sales had been quiet this whole time. Now he spoke up. What does the board think about this? I haven't told them yet. The room went silent again. You're planning to present this to them without board approval first? Susan, the lawyer, looked alarmed. David, that's career suicide. They'll vote you out. Maybe, David said. But I'm the largest shareholder. They can make noise, but they can't actually remove me without cause. And treating our employees fairly isn't cause. It is if it tanks our stock price, Michael said. Investors want growth. They want profit. They don't want us playing social worker. Then maybe we get different investors. David closed his laptop. Look, I know this is a lot. I know it's scary. But I'm going to do this with or without your support. I'd rather do it with you. Rachel, who'd been silent most of the evening, finally spoke. Can I say something? Everyone turned to her. My sister is a teacher. She makes less than some of our entry-level people. And you know what? Her school district just implemented a program exactly like this. Housing assistance, emergency funds, better pay, and teacher retention went up 30%. Test scores improved. Everything got better. I don't think David's crazy. I think he might be right. Thank you, David said quietly. The discussion went on for another 2 hours. It got heated at times. Michael threatened to quit twice. James kept running calculations on his phone. But slowly something shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was conscience. But by 9:30, they'd reached an agreement. They would move forward with a modified version of David's plan. Smaller wage increases to start, scaled up over 2 years, a pilot emergency fund program, and yes, reduced executive bonuses. Michael was the only holdout, but he agreed not to fight it publicly. After everyone left, David sat on his porch, completely drained. His wife came out and sat beside him. How'd it go? Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped, she squeezed his hand. What's next? Next I have to tell the board. And then, he paused, then I have to tell the employees. And I think Jennifer should be there when I do. You're going to tell her story? Only if she agrees. But people need to understand why this matters. They need to know this isn't just some corporate initiative. It's real. It affects real people. The next morning, David called Jennifer into his office. She came in looking nervous, probably thinking she was in trouble. When he explained what he wanted to do, she started crying. You want me to stand up in front of the entire company and tell them I was homeless? I want you to help me make sure this never happens to anyone else, David said gently. But only if you're comfortable. I won't force you, Jennifer wiped her eyes. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. When? Friday. All hands meeting. 10 o'clock. As Jennifer left his office, David pulled out his phone. He had 4 days to prepare the announcement of his life. 4 days to get the board on board, finalize the numbers, and figure out how to explain to 340 employees that their company was about to change in ways they'd never imagined. 4 days to get this right, because there wouldn't be a second chance. The board meeting on Wednesday was brutal. David walked into the conference room at 2 o'clock sharp, carrying his laptop and a folder full of printed reports. The 7 board members were already seated, their faces showing varying degrees of curiosity and concern. They'd gotten his agenda item that morning, major compensation restructuring proposal. Vague enough to get their attention, specific enough to make them worried. Harold, the board chairman and oldest member, didn't waste time with pleasantries. David, what's this about? We're not due for compensation reviews until next quarter. David set up his laptop and pulled up his presentation. Something happened last week that changed my perspective on how we're running this company. He told them the story. Not just Jennifer's story, but the survey results, the comments from employees, the reality of what was happening inside their profitable, successful company. He showed them the numbers, the turnover costs, the productivity data, the comparison with competitors who'd implemented similar programs. When he finished, he waited. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Margaret, who'd been a board member for 3 years, spoke first. This is admirable, David, really. But you're talking about cutting into profit margins during a competitive quarter. Our shareholders expect growth. Our shareholders should expect a sustainable company, David countered. What's not sustainable is burning through employees because we can't keep them housed and fed. Harold leaned forward. Let me be direct. You're proposing we cut executive compensation, increase base salaries across the board, and create entirely new benefit programs, all while tech stocks are volatile and investors are jumpy. Do you understand how that's going to look? It's going to look like we care about our people. It's going to look like we're in trouble, Harold shot back. When a company suddenly slashes executive pay and pumps money into retention programs, investors think there's a crisis. They think we're trying to stop people from jumping ship. David hadn't considered that angle. He felt his confidence waver slightly but pushed forward. Then we control the narrative. We announce it as a strategic initiative, a long-term investment in human capital. Pretty words, said Richard, the youngest board member and a venture capitalist. But I'm looking at $3.8 million in first-year costs. That's $3.8 million not going to product development, not going to marketing, not going to expansion. How do you justify that to shareholders who are expecting 7% growth this year? Because those shareholders don't see what I saw last Thursday night. David's voice grew stronger. They don't see talented, hard-working people choosing between gas and groceries. They don't see employees too proud to ask for help while we're buying vacation homes. And if they did see it, I'd like to think they'd support this decision. You'd be wrong, Richard said bluntly. They'd support whatever makes their stock worth more. That's how investing works. The debate went on for 90 minutes. David defended every number, every projection, every assumption. Some board members were sympathetic but cautious. Others were openly hostile to the idea. Margaret kept coming back to shareholder value. Harold worried about setting precedents. Richard picked apart his financial projections. Finally, Harold called for a vote. All in favor of approving David's proposal as presented? 3 hands went up. David's heart sank. He needed 4. All opposed? 3 hands, 1 abstention. Margaret. She looked uncomfortable. I need more time to review the numbers. I want to see a modified proposal with a phased implementation, something that doesn't hit our quarterly earnings all at once. Harold looked at David. You have until Friday to revise the proposal. We'll vote again next week. But David, let me be clear. If this goes through and it impacts our stock price negatively, there will be consequences for all of us. David left the meeting feeling defeated but not broken. He had 2 days to revise his plan and somehow make it more palatable without gutting what mattered. Thursday was a blur. He worked with James to create a phased approach. Year 1 would focus on the emergency fund and modest wage increases for the lowest paid employees. Year 2 would expand the housing assistance program. Year 3 would complete the full compensation restructure. The executive bonus cuts would still happen immediately, but they'd be positioned as voluntary leadership solidarity rather than mandated sacrifice. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't as fast as David wanted, but it was something. On Thursday evening, he met with Jennifer at a coffee shop near the office. She came alone this time, her daughter with a babysitter. She looked nervous. I've been thinking about Friday, she said, stirring her coffee without drinking it, about standing up in front of everyone. And I'm terrified. We don't have to do it, David said quickly. I can make the announcement without, no, I want to. She looked up at him. I need to. Because if I don't, people won't understand. They'll think this is just some corporate thing. They won't know it's real. It is real, I know. But they need to hear it from someone like them. Not from you. No offense, none taken. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Why are you doing this, really? You could have just helped me quietly, given me a raise, moved on. Why turn the whole company upside down? David thought about the question. He'd been asking himself the same thing all week. Because once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, he finally said. I spent 8 years building this company thinking I was doing everything right. Good salaries, good benefits, good culture. And then I found out that people were suffering, and I'd been completely blind to it. I can't live with that. I won't. Jennifer nodded slowly. Okay, then let's make sure Friday counts. They spent the next hour going over what she would say. David didn't want to script her, but they talked through the key points. Her story, her struggles, what it meant to her that someone finally saw and cared. She made notes on her phone, her hands shaking slightly. When they parted ways, David felt a strange mix of hope and dread. Tomorrow would either be the best decision he'd ever made, or the beginning of the end of his career. Friday morning arrived with gray skies and a forecast of rain. David got to the office at 7. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10, in the large conference hall that the company used for major announcements. By 9:30, employees were starting to file in, looking curious and concerned. All hands meetings usually meant one of two things: great news or terrible news. Nobody knew which this would be. David stood backstage with Jennifer. She was pale, breathing fast. "I can't do this. I'm going to throw up." "Yes, you can," Patricia said gently. She'd come backstage to offer support. "You're stronger than you think." At exactly 10 o'clock, David walked onto the stage. The room fell silent. 340 faces stared back at him, some curious, some worried, some just tired from a long week. "Good morning," David began. "Thank you all for being here. I'm going to tell you a story. It's not a comfortable story, but it's an important one." He took a breath and started talking. He told them about staying late the previous Thursday, about the voices in the lobby. He didn't use Jennifer's name yet. He just described what he'd heard, what he'd seen, what he'd felt. The room was absolutely silent. People leaned forward in their seats. "And then I started asking questions," David continued. "How many people are struggling? How many are one emergency away from disaster?" So we did a survey. He pulled up the results on the screen behind him. The numbers were stark. Gasps rippled through the audience. "These are our people," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "These are you. And I failed you. We failed you. The leadership team, the board, me. We built a successful company and somehow forgot that success means nothing if the people creating it can't survive." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Some people were crying. Others looked shocked. "So we're going to fix it. Starting today." He outlined the new programs: the emergency fund, the wage increases, the housing assistance, the timeline. As he spoke, the energy in the room shifted. Confusion turned to disbelief. Disbelief turned to hope. "But before I take questions," David said, "I want you to hear from someone else. The person whose courage to ask for help opened my eyes." He gestured to the side of the stage. Jennifer walked out slowly, her legs shaking. And then she started to tell her story. Jennifer stood at the microphone, her hands gripping the sides of the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. For a moment she just stood there, looking out at 340 faces. Some she recognized, some she didn't. All of them were waiting. "My name is Jennifer," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, then louder. "My name is Jennifer, and 3 weeks ago, I was sleeping in my car with my 4-year-old daughter. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. I've worked here for 2 years," she continued. "I love my job. I'm good at what I do. I show up on time, I meet my deadlines, I contribute to my team. But none of that mattered when my apartment building was condemned. I had 48 hours to find a new place and I couldn't. Not on my salary. Not in this city." Her voice started to shake, but she pushed through. "So I lived in my car. I parked in different places every night so nobody would notice. I used the gym here to shower at 5 in the morning before anyone arrived. I kept my daughter's car seat covered with a blanket so she could sleep. And I came to work every single day and pretended everything was fine." Someone in the audience was openly crying now. Others looked stunned. "Last Thursday, my car broke down. I had nowhere to go. No family nearby. No friends who could help. I came into this building at 9 at night and begged the security guard to let us sleep in the lobby. Just for one night." She looked at David, standing at the side of the stage. "And that's when he found me." Jennifer took a shaky breath. "I thought I was going to lose my job. I thought my daughter was going to be taken away. Instead, David helped me. He didn't judge me. He didn't shame me. He just helped. And then he started asking questions. Questions nobody had asked before." She turned to face the audience fully. "I know some of you are struggling too. I know because you told me. We don't talk about it. We're ashamed. We think it's our fault. But it's not our fault that rent keeps going up while our paychecks stay the same. It's not our fault that one emergency can destroy everything we've worked for." Her voice grew stronger. "What's happening today, these changes David is announcing, this matters. It matters because it means someone finally saw us. Someone finally cared enough to do something about it. And I wanted you to hear this from me so you'd know it's real. So you'd know you're not alone." She stepped back from the microphone. The room erupted. Not polite applause. Real emotional, thunderous applause. People stood. Some were sobbing. David saw employees hugging each other, saw relief and hope on faces that had been guarded for so long. Jennifer walked off stage and David met her with a hug. "You did amazing," he whispered. "Thank you." The question and answer session that followed lasted an hour. Employees wanted to know about specifics. When would the wage increases start? How would the emergency fund work? Who qualified for housing assistance? David and Patricia answered every question as honestly as they could. One question hit David particularly hard. A young man from the IT department stood up. "What made you decide to do this? Most companies don't care. Why do you?" David thought about his answer carefully. "Because I realized that I'd been measuring success wrong. I was looking at revenue and growth and profit margins, but I wasn't looking at whether the people creating that success could afford to live. And once I saw that, I couldn't look away. None of us should be able to look away." After the meeting, something remarkable happened. Employees didn't just go back to their desks. They stayed. They talked to each other. People who'd been suffering in silence found others who understood. Support networks formed right there in the conference hall. David watched it happen, feeling overwhelmed. Over the next few weeks, the changes began to roll out. The emergency fund went live, and within the first month, 18 people used it. 18 employees who would have otherwise fallen through the cracks. Car repairs, medical bills, security deposits for new apartments. Each request was handled with dignity and discretion. The wage increases started in phases just as David had revised for the board. The lowest paid employees saw their paychecks grow first. David heard stories of people crying when they saw the difference. One woman from customer service came to thank him personally, saying she could finally afford her daughter's asthma medication without choosing between that and electricity. The housing assistance program took longer to implement, but by month 3, they'd partnered with 4 apartment complexes willing to offer company-subsidized units. Jennifer was one of the first to move in. David would never forget the photo she sent him of her daughter's new bedroom, a real bed with a pink comforter, sunlight streaming through actual windows. But it wasn't all smooth. There were growing pains. Some employees who didn't qualify for assistance felt resentful. There were complaints about fairness, about who deserved help and who didn't. David and Patricia spent hours addressing these concerns, refining the programs, making adjustments. The board meeting the following month was tense. The stock price had dipped slightly after the announcement went public. Some investors had questions, but something unexpected happened. 3 major news outlets picked up the story. Tech CEO cuts own bonus to help employees, read one headline. Company creates emergency fund after CEO discovers employee homelessness, read another. The publicity was overwhelming. And it wasn't all positive. Some criticized it as a publicity stunt. Others called it too little, too late. But something else happened too. Job applications to the company increased by 200%. Talented people wanted to work somewhere that valued its employees. 6 months after that night in the lobby, David was reviewing quarterly reports when Patricia knocked on his door. "You need to see this," she said, handing him a printed document. It was an analysis of company metrics. Employee turnover was down 42%. Productivity was up 28%. Customer satisfaction scores had improved. And despite the increased labor costs, they were still profitable. The investment was paying off exactly as David had predicted. But the number that struck him most was at the bottom of the page. Employee satisfaction surveys showed a 93% approval rating for the new programs, and 87% of employees reported feeling more secure in their jobs. "We did it," Patricia said quietly. "It's actually working." That afternoon, David got an email from Jennifer. She'd been promoted to senior developer, a recognition of her skills that had always been there but finally had space to shine now that she wasn't drowning. The email was short. "I wanted you to know that my daughter started preschool today. A real preschool, not just daycare. She has friends. She's happy. We have a home. Thank you for seeing us that night. Thank you for not looking away." David read the email 3 times, then saved it in a folder he'd created called Why This Matters. 3 other companies announced similar programs over the next year, citing David's company as inspiration. The movement was spreading. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight. Systemic problems required systemic solutions, but it was a start. One evening, almost a year after that fateful Thursday, David was working late again. Old habits die hard. As he headed to the elevator around 8:30, he saw Robert at the security desk. The night guard looked up and smiled. "Heading home, boss?" "Yeah, long day." "Hey, David." Robert's expression grew serious. I never got to properly thank you. For what you did. For Jennifer and everyone else. That took guts, David shook his head. I should have seen it sooner. But you did see it eventually. And you did something about it. A lot of people wouldn't have. David rode the elevator down, thinking about Robert's words. The lobby was quiet tonight. No voices, no one in crisis. Just the soft hum of the building settling in for the evening. As he walked to his car, David thought about how one moment can change everything. One decision to step forward instead of walking away. One choice to listen instead of ignore. He thought about the placard that now hung in the lobby, installed at Jennifer's suggestion. It was simple, just 3 words in brushed metal. Listen, see, act. David had learned that being a leader wasn't just about profit margins and growth strategies. It was about the people who showed up every day, who trusted you with their livelihoods, who deserved more than just a paycheck. They deserved to be seen. He got in his car and drove home, where his wife was waiting with dinner, where he would tell her about the quarterly reports, about Jennifer's email, about how sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the most important thing. And somewhere across the city, in a small apartment with pink curtains, a little girl was falling asleep in her own bed, safe and warm, while her mother worked on her laptop at the kitchen table, no longer afraid of tomorrow. That's what success actually looked like. That's what it had always meant to look like. David just hadn't known it until that one night, when he stayed late at work and everything changed.